Throughout human history, criminal activity has been a ubiquitous presence, but when it comes to those in positions of global leadership, their actions are scrutinized with an even finer lens. While some leaders are driven by noble ambitions to better the world, others have been caught engaging in illicit behavior that they would prefer to keep concealed from public scrutiny. This article delved into the unsettling instances where world leaders have been implicated in criminal activity ranging from bribery and embezzlement to abuses of power. These cases lay bare the darker side of those who hold some of the most exalted positions of power on the planet. Number 1. Park Geun-hye. A former president of South Korea was impeached and ousted from the office in 2017 after being embroiled in a corruption scandal. She was later convicted and sentenced to 20 years in prison on charges of bribery, abuse of power, and coercion. The corruption scandal involved Park and her close associate, Choi Soon-sil, who was accused of leveraging her relationship with the president to persuade companies to donate millions of dollars to foundations she controlled. It was also alleged that Choi wielded significant influence over Park's decision-making, including policy decisions and appointments to key government positions. Park was charged with aiding and abetting Choi's actions and receiving bribes in exchange for granting favors to the companies that had donated to Choi's foundations. Additionally, she was accused of using her authority to blacklist artists who were critical of her government and suppress freedom of speech. The South Korean National Assembly impeached Park in December 2016, and the country's constitutional court upheld the decision in March 2017. She was subsequently apprehended, and in 2018 she was found guilty on multiple charges and sentenced to 24 years in prison. However, in 2021, the Supreme Court of South Korea lowered her sentence to 20 years. Number 2. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who goes by the nickname Lula, is a former Brazilian president who's been involved in several corruption scandals. In 2017, he was found guilty of corruption and money laundering and received a sentence of 9.5 years in prison. Lula was accused of receiving bribes from Odebrecht, a Brazilian construction company that was involved in a large-scale corruption scheme known as Operation Car Wash. The scheme consisted of paying off politicians and government officials in exchange for contracts and other advantages. In 2019, an appeals court reduced Lula's sentence to 8 years and 10 months, and he was released from jail. Nevertheless, due to his criminal conviction, he remained ineligible to run for office. In March 2021, the Brazilian Supreme Court nullified Lula's convictions, ruling that the judge who convicted him lacked jurisdiction. Consequently, Lula's political rights were reinstated, and he is now eligible to run for office once again. Nevertheless, he still faces other legal issues related to allegations of corruption. Number 3. Otto Perez Molina, a previous leader of Guatemala, got apprehended in 2015 over claims of corruption. He was accused of taking bribes in exchange for reducing import taxes on commodities such as fuel and farming products. Additionally, he encountered allegations of participation in a customs scam plan known as La Línea, in which officials acknowledged bribes for decreasing import duties. The Guatemalan Congress impeached Molina in 2015, and he then resigned from his position. Afterwards, he got arrested and faced accusations of corruption, which encompassed money laundering, racketeering, and unlawful enrichment. Molina dismissed the allegations, and presently, his trial continues. The corruption scandal that caused Molina's downfall affected several prominent individuals in Guatemala, including politicians, businessmen, and officials. The inquiry was headed by the International Commission Against Impunity in Guatemala and the Guatemalan Public Ministry, resulting in the detention of several high-ranking officials. Molina's case symbolizes the struggle against corruption in Guatemala, which is a significant problem affecting the country's politics and society. The inquiry into his alleged offenses persists, and he has yet to receive a conviction. Number 4. Alberto Fujimori was the previous president of Peru who was found guilty of multiple crimes, such as corruptions and violations of human rights. He held power from 1990 to 2000, and throughout his term, he implemented various controversial policies, including the introduction of neoliberal economic reforms and a crackdown on leftist rebels. In 2000, Fujimori fled to Japan during a corruption scandal, where he stayed until 2005 when he traveled to Chile. After arriving in Chile, he was subsequently detained and then extradited to Peru, where he faced trial for corruption and human rights abuses. Fujimori was found guilty of several offenses, which included embezzlement, misuse of power, and human rights abuses like ordering extrajudicial killings and forced disappearances. A verdict was reached and he was sentenced to 25 years behind bars. However, the sentence was later reduced to 14 years. The crimes committed by Fujimori are viewed as some of the most serious examples of corruption and violations of human rights in modern Peruvian history. The trial and subsequent conviction of Fujimori were considered a significant step towards accountability for past abuses of power in Peru, although some critics argue that the trial was politically motivated. Number 5. Omar al-Bashir, an erstwhile president of Sudan, was ousted in a military coup in April 2019 and stands accused of perpetrating war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide during the Darfur conflict, which began in 2003. In 2009 and 2010, the International Criminal Court brought charges of war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide against al-Bashir. He is accused of masterminding a massive campaign of killing, rape, and pillage against innocent civilians in Darfur, a western region of Sudan where the conflict between government forces and rebel groups has resulted in the deaths of approximately 300,000 people and the displacement of over 2 million individuals. Al-Bashir has vehemently denied the charges levied against him and steadfastly refused to appear before the ICC. During his reign, Sudan has also rebuffed the ICC's calls for cooperation. Nonetheless, since his ouster, Sudan's interim government has expressed its willingness to cooperate with the ICC's investigation into al-Bashir and other officials connected with the Darfur conflict. Al-Bashir's detention and indictment are being hailed as a significant stride towards the accountability for the atrocious acts committed in Darfur. Despite that, the ICC is yet to put al-Bashir on trial, and his case is still ongoing. Number 6. Ehud Olmert, a former premier of Israel, was condemned on graft in 2014, indicted with taking bribes while performing as Jerusalem's mayor and the Minister of Trade, Industry and Labor. Although Olmert was initially probed for bribery accusations in the early 2000s, accusations were not filed against him until he resigned his position as premier in 2009. The accusations arose from the Holy Land case, a Jerusalem-based property development initiative, and comprised bribery, deceit, violation of trust, and interference with justice. Olmert's conviction was part of a broader effort against corruption in Israel and was seen as a notable triumph for those opposing dishonest activities. Following an initial sentence of 6 years in prison, which was later reduced to 18 months on appeal, Olmert served time from February 2016 to July 2017. Despite his conviction, Olmert professes his innocence and contends that he was a victim of political persecution. Since his release from prison, he has returned to public life as a political analyst in Israeli politics. The exposure of world leaders disrupting crime scenes serves as a stark reminder that no one is exempt from the law. While some may advocate for higher standards for those in power, it's vital to acknowledge that they are fallible and capable of errors. Nevertheless, when their mistakes turn into criminal conduct, it's imperative that they face consequences. Shedding light on these cases can promote transparency and ethics in global leadership, guaranteeing that those who violate the law are held accountable. This process emphasizes the need for justice and encourages an environment of honesty and integrity.